As a fan of older games, sometimes we can forget that power and comparison weren't really a thing before the start of the official console wars. Before that, of course, we had the NES and then the Super NES, and we just expected newer games and better looking games. But it was always about the experience, not just about the look of the games. I don't think there has ever been a more concrete example of this than in 1998. The PlayStation 1 was in full swing, and most people chose that system over the others that were available. It was a 32-bit system that promised 3D gaming and for the most part delivered. Two systems competing for gamers' time in a generation is nothing new. However, two systems in one generation that were so vastly different in power is, and what was accomplished is staggering when you think about it. The N64 was a 64-bit system that competed with a 32-bit system, and I wanted to show two games that signified what these systems could do and how the people creating games use them. Now, I'm not trying to say that power is the only thing that I look for or you should look for when buying a video game system. Sure, it's important. We want to go from one generation to the next, and we want an evolution in the things that we see and do or we're capable of seeing and doing when developers create these games. But it's more important to have creators, and I wanted to highlight that because in 1998, just 3 months apart, two of the biggest games almost ever that changed gaming almost forever were released within just 3 months of each other, and one on a 64-bit system and the other on a 32-bit system. So let's start with the 32-bit system first. Metal Gear Solid is an action-adventure stealth video game developed and published by Konami for the PlayStation in 1998. It was directed, produced, and written by Hideo Kojima and follows the MSX2 video games Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, which Kojima also worked on. It was unveiled at the 1996 Tokyo Game Show and then demonstrated at trade shows, including the 1997 Electronic Entertainment Expo. Its Japanese release was originally planned for late 1997 before being delayed to 1998. You control Solid Snake, a soldier who infiltrates a nuclear weapons facility to neutralize the terrorist threat from Foxhound, a renegade special forces unit. Snake must liberate hostages and stop the terrorists from launching a nuclear strike. Cinematic cutscenes were rendered using the in-game engine, and graphics and voice acting is used throughout. Metal Gear Solid received critical acclaim and it sold more than 7 million copies worldwide and shipped 12 million demos. It scored an average of 94 out of 100 on the aggregate website Metacritic. It is regarded as one of the greatest and most important video games of all time and helped popularize the stealth genre and in-engine cutscenes. To say Metal Gear Solid on the PlayStation 1 was an important game for the time would be an understatement. Again, this game came out of nowhere and created a genre, the stealth genre, and brought it into the mainstream. On a 32-bit system, the PlayStation 1, this game pushed the limits of what you were able to do in a video game. The AI reacting to your footprints in the snow. I remember playing that part and walking through the snow and then hiding behind something and the guard walking up and hearing the guard say, "Whose footprints are these?" I had never experienced anything like that in a video game. It was a transformative experience and one that completely changed what to expect while you're playing as a character in a video game. The use of in-engine for the cutscenes. You were never taken out of the experience. It was truly a cinematic experience, and it was one of the first games to actually make me feel like movies and games were becoming synonymous with one another. It was almost indistinguishable. And of course, looking back, the graphics aren't that good, but at the time, it was absolutely incredible. And the limitations of the PlayStation 1 and that 32-bit canvas to paint on really weren't a limitation. I'll get back to that later on. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time is a 1998 action-adventure game developed and published by Nintendo for the Nintendo 64. It was released in Japan and North America in November 1998 and in PAL regions the following month. Ocarina of Time is the first game in the Legend of Zelda series with 3D graphics. The game was developed by Nintendo EAD, produced by series co-creator Shigeru Miyamoto, and written by Kensuke Tanabe. Veteran Zelda series composer Koji Kondo composed the musical score. The player controls Link in the realm of Hyrule on a quest to stop the evil King Ganondorf by traveling through time and navigating dungeons and an overworld. The game introduced features such as target lock-on systems and context-sensitive buttons, which have since become common in 3D adventure games. The player must play songs on an ocarina to progress. Ocarina of Time was acclaimed by critics and consumers who praised its visuals, sound, gameplay, soundtrack, and writing, and won several awards and accolades. It has been ranked by numerous publications as the greatest video game of all time and is the highest rated game of all time on the review aggregate site Metacritic. It was commercially successful with more than 7 million copies sold worldwide. In the United States, it received more than 3 times more pre-orders than any other game at the time. The Legend of Zelda has been cited by the Guinness World Records as the most critically acclaimed video game of all time. I mean, you can imagine playing the PlayStation 1, getting Metal Gear Solid 1 in 1998, completely being blown away, and then, out of nowhere, 3 months later, Ocarina of Time. Now, graphically, of course, it was like 2 generations ahead of what was being done on the PlayStation 1 at that time, but it's not just about graphics. It was about the gameplay. It was about the refinement, and the movement in a 3D space was just spot on with Ocarina of Time. Nintendo even created the lock-on system to allow that character to move in a 3D space because it hadn't been done before, and here we are all these years later, and that gameplay mechanic is used for every single third-person action-adventure game. What's really important about these 2 titles releasing in the same year, in the same generation, just 3 months apart, is that, yes, going from one generation to the next, we all want that evolution in power, the PlayStation 1, the PlayStation 2 being more powerful on paper, the PlayStation 3, etc. The Nintendo 64 was more powerful than the Super Nintendo and the NES, but the takeaway in 1998, for me, was that it's less about the power of the system and more about the creators and how important it is to foster creativity and to foster creative people, and not so much about the canvas that you give them to paint on, because I truly believe that it was the limitations of this time period that created the innovations. So the next time you get excited about a new generation or a new system and you read about the specs and you're excited about the graphical capabilities going from one generation to the next, that's really important and that's fun. But take the time to think about who are the creators and how are they going to use this system to give me experiences that I haven't had before, because limitations breed innovations. Thanks for watching the video. Think about liking and subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.